Dearest Queers, good afternoon, happy Monday, welcome. I'm Gray Doolin, I'm a healer and mentor, and I work with queer and trans folks struggling with feelings of disconnection and loneliness to help them live their best relational lives. There's a phone call coming in that I'm going to decline. We're off to a great start. So welcome today. Like I said, I work with queer trans folks struggling with feelings of loneliness and disconnection and give them strategies around connection and to live their best relational lives. So this is a weekly live series I'm doing called Dearest Queers. It's based on questions that you all submitted, and so I'm here providing the answers. Before we get started today, I want to give a birthday shout out to my sister Alyssa. Even though I've already sent you a birthday text and love, I just want to say happy birthday to you. I feel like the Leo in you will really appreciate a public celebration of you. So happy birthday, Liz. I love you. Welcome to the year that you were entering. So also, if you hang with me through this entire episode, I have a special announcement at the end of this episode, which I'm really excited about, a thing that I'm going to try differently in a couple of weeks, so hang on to that through the end. And so today's question is, how do I reach out and ask for support without adding to other people's difficulties? Or, and I summarize this because I feel like it's the real crux of what the person is asking, is how do I stop feeling like I'm too much? So to the asker, the person asking this, like, I see you and I love you, and it makes a lot of sense, right? That, I mean, especially now that, like, collectively there are a lot of dumpster fires happening, and then, you know, there's a lot of stuff happening in individual folks' lives based on what's happening in the collective, and then also just because it's part of the human experience to have challenges and difficulties. That's what we're here in these human bodies sorting out, and we have various levels of challenges based on many different things. That's a topic for a different episode about what impacts our lives, but just to note that, right, it can be really hard when we see people struggling around us to then want to reach out to them for fear of adding on to what they're already going through. However, like, when we sort of squash that desire, and not because we don't want to add to people's difficulties, the chances of us getting the support that we desire and that we're really wanting are very low. And so I'm going to name, you know, I already, like, sort of the flip of this question, the title is, how do I stop feeling like I'm too much? And I want to name sort of like the truth of that feeling of too much stems from feeling like we aren't enough. And so just follow me here for a minute, right? So if I knew and I trusted that my desire for the type and amount of support was my birthright, that I deserved all of the support that I desired and could dream up because I'm whole and worthy and lovable just for being me, not because I, like, work for it or need to do a thing for it, then there wouldn't be a feeling of it being too much, right? If I knew that I deserved it, if I knew I could have access to it, it would be just the perfect amount. Like, I would be just right, just perfect, right? It would be like Goldilocks and that, like, the perfect bed and oatmeal, right? So, like, we already know the things. I know that I'm enough. I know that I'm worthy of it. I'm deserving of it. And so just all of you, the asker of this question, me, all of you listening right now or on the replay, like, you deserve all of the support that you desire. Like, period. Like, just, like, straight up, that you could, like, dream up to say, this is what I want support in my life to look like. And if anyone in your life gives you feedback otherwise, either directly or indirectly, then they aren't your people. And not in a, like, there doesn't need to be any, like, sort of like F them or blah blah blah, like, there doesn't need to be drama about it, but just like, okay, like, this, like, I'm too much for this person, I'm not too much, period, and, like, I'm gonna, like, take my perfectly level needs, like, somewhere else, and that's okay. So we can, like, bless and release that person, and we can, like, move on. It's kind of like the conversation we had around people who are inconsistent, right? If we have folks in our lives who reflect back to us that we're too much, then let's choose something different. Let's choose an experience where people say, yeah, I can, like, meet you in that need. I, like, see you and I can, like, show up in how you're desiring to be supported, because we deserve, all of us deserve that level of support and care in our lives. So the thing about asking for support, though, is that it requires vulnerability, and I think that that's the place where many of us get tripped up, right? Because it is, like, it's a hard practice to be vulnerable, and it is a practice. It can feel icky and uncomfortable, and we need to be really intentional about it. So Um, and some of us just, for again, a whole host of reasons, like don't want to do that vulnerable work. So for those of us, or for folks who come from potentially like neglectful backgrounds, or, like folks who have had to do a real good job, like self-regulating and kind of like getting shit done because their survival depended on it, or like if you have an Aries moon or are a Capricorn, like this practice of asking for support and vulnerability like might be a little bit more challenging. And like, yes, I'm dragging some folks here, but like also really want to acknowledge that our early emotional experiences with caregivers around the ways we were supported or not absolutely impact our ability to identify like our desire for support and what it is that we need around that, and our ability to ask for it and our comfort in either asking for it, or like if the person says no, our capacity to handle that like perceived rejection. So that's a much larger conversation for a different episode, but I just like really want to name and acknowledge that all of us are coming in to this conversation around support with our own experiences that are going to impact our ability to know what it is that we need around support, and then to ask for it, and like that entire experience. So that feels really important to name, so we can begin to sort of assess where we sit in that. So on a basic level, important factors like that are impacting this question about support is our ability to know what type of support we desire, and then whether or not we believe that we deserve the support that we desire, and then actually reaching out and asking for it or seeking the types of support that we are wanting or desiring. So knowing the type of support that we desire comes from this thing that I've been talking about through all of these episodes and like live series, which is around, developing intimacy with ourselves. Because when we have the intimacy with ourselves, we're able to know what it is that we are desiring around support. Like, do we just want to be seen, or do we want to be heard, or just like witness what's coming up? Do we need are we needing some tangible material support around resources? Do we need help getting groceries, or like whatever? But like having intimacy with our own experience is going to impact our ability to know what type of support it is that we're desiring. So that's one thing that's impacting it. And then the second thing that I mentioned is our belief about whether or not we believe that we deserve the support that we desire. And like I said, this is going to come from our early experiences with support, and whether that was consistent or possible, or the feedback that we got about that. But as a point of like reflection in this moment, both to the person who asked this question and then everyone listening here, is that like, do you believe that you deserve the kind of support that you desire? And I'm guessing like some of you are like, duh, Gray, of course, because like, why wouldn't I? Like I know that blah, blah, blah. But like, just like, again, walk with me for a minute. I think many of us do this thing, where we sort of settle into relationships that feel comfortable, or we have models for what support looks like, or, and so we kind of like settle into and aren't very in touch with like our actual desire around what it is that we are wanting around support, So if I asked you to just like suspend that for a minute, and like if you could have the network or community or best friend or text thread or weekly Zoom call or quarantine pod or like whatever that looks like, if you could have like your dream network and community and support, like what would that look like? And if it aligns with what is currently in your life, like that's amazing, like fantastic, that's wonderful. And if it doesn't, like where's the discrepancy in there? And like, what is it that you're desiring that isn't here? And then where do your beliefs about either the possibility of that existing or your deservedness of it, like where does that all fit in? And this is just, I think often when we pause and like give ourselves a moment to like really like feel into or imagine into like this thing that we dream that we want, because we hear limitation all the time about that's not possible, or this person's overwhelmed, or blah blah blah. Technology can't do that, right? So we're in this world often of these stories of limitation. But like, can you give yourself permission to dream what your like ultimate desire for community and network and support looks like? And then let's have a conversation about how to make that happen in your life. So the second piece, right, around deservedness. So I would love to hear your reflections about like what came up, if you like took a moment to pause and like what came up in that. I'd love to hear from you. Yeah, and like I said, if you're like living your best supported life right now, like amazing, good for you. Which I mean with much like authenticity. I'm not being flip about that. So, and it's, a beautiful thing about knowing that we deserve the kind of support that we desire is that, like, if someone is unavailable to show up for that or says, no, I can't right now, is that, like, we don't have to take it personally. Like, we know that it's not about us. Because we inherently know that we're worthy of it, we get to, like, let people be where they are as well. And we don't take it personally. Like, it doesn't feel so rejecting, or abandoning, or, like, whatever comes up around when people say no. And giving people the choice to say yes or no, I am available or I'm not, which is otherwise known as consent, like, that fosters a foundation of truth and sovereignty in relationship with one another. So building that foundation requires both folks to know themselves well and practice good communication, which is a practice, like, it's a thing that we are cultivating and working on. And that is so that one person can ask directly for support and the other person, has enough intimacy with themselves that they know the bounds of what they have capacity for in that moment. So they can say, yes or no to that. They can consent to say, I can show up for you and support you, or I can't. And that, allowing each person, that, like, that idea of sovereignty to, like, be where they are, and that, like, it doesn't mean a thing about one another. It's just, like, I get to say yes or no to that. There's so much freedom. And, like, that's what conscious relating is about. Like, that's what it means to be in conscious relationship with one another, is to, like, take ownership over my, like, set of, like, what I have capacity for and, like, my own desires. So an example of what this looks like in practice, I'll give you just an example from my own life, which I feel like, in these episodes can be helpful. So at the beginning of quarantine, I was, like, having a real time. I think, like, many of us were, and, like, ongoing, sort of continues. Like, my attachment shit was all triggered. Like, I think the rest of the world, like, I was, like, in a time of change and adjustment and, like, really just, like, adjusting to all of that. I was having a lot of feelings, and, like, I was doing my, like, self-care practices and, like, self-soothing, and I, like, also needed some support. I had a desire to be, like, seen and witnessed in what was coming up for me. And so there was a person, like, in my community that I was like, that is the type of energy I would, like, love to be behind this, like, holding container. And so I reached out to them and just said, hey, I'm having a hard moment. Like, do you have capacity to, like, hold space for me? Like, soon, like, right now, or, like, and, like, just sort of, like, let me know, like, when they were available. And this was, it was, like, later on a Saturday evening, and, so I, like, reached out because this is what I was desiring around support. And so they got back to me and said yes, and then we connected, and I got to, like, cry and be sad and be witnessed, and it was, like, it was the thing that I was needing. And yeah, but, like, I had to do the asking for it. Like, I had to do the vulnerable thing to say, I'm having a hard time, and then I asked them if they had capacity to be of support, like, to hold this in that moment. And, like, were they also experiencing stressors in their life? Yes. And they could have said no, and that would have been absolutely okay. But, like, that would have given me an opportunity to, like, practice more vulnerability and reach out to someone else. And so the thing, dear asker, in your question that I really want to highlight is that the way that it's phrased is that there's this desire to take care of others in place of getting the support that you are desiring or that you need, right? So this question about how do I not become a burden to them, well, that's not for you to decide. That's for them to decide. Like, you get to decide that you are worthy and deserving of all of the support that you want and desire, and then you get to ask for it or seek it out in whatever way. Just, like, period. So it is that simple. I know that it's not easy. I, like, deeply know that it is not easy because it, like I said, it requires that vulnerability of saying, this is the thing that I'm needing. And then we have to, like, if that person says no, like, there's the potential of fielding a lot of feelings. So I recognize and I know that it's not easy, right? I've had my own, like, lifelong process with this. It is a practice. And there's, like, developing resilience in it, So if our default response is to take care of others instead of getting the support that we need, I would encourage us to pay attention to that dynamic, right? So that if we're making the decision for someone else that we would be too much or be burdensome instead of just checking in with them about that, like, just begin to pay attention to that. If that is our, like, default response and, like, I'm feeling like I need some support but I don't want to burden others, I'm making that decision for them instead of just checking it out, begin to pay attention to that coming up, because that's important. So most of us have not been taught how to communicate directly, and to be really clear about what it is that we're asking for. And that's for a whole host of reasons. Again, different episode, different time. But when we can do this practice about knowing that we are worthy of what we desire, especially around support, and then directly ask for it, it puts things above board. It's like everything is up here then, and we can have a direct and mature and honest conversation about it, because it's all right here, right? And so that people get to make conscious, informed decisions based on all the information being there, instead of someone feeling like an indirect pull from you. And there's no judgment on that at all. We all have developed, adaptive ways of coping and getting our needs met. And I think that there can be self-compassion and self-forgiveness in that practice. So I just want to note that I have no judgment about ways that we might be currently communicating, but here are ways, if you're asking for how do I get support, this is the conversation that we're having about it, in this moment. So bringing all of that back home, question, how do I reach out and ask for support without adding to other people's difficulties? The answer is that you reach out and ask for support and let other people decide if supporting you would be adding to their difficulties. That's the answer to that question, sort of simply put. And it's true, okay, though, we can read the room a little bit, right? So that, if you know that one of your BFFs is, all up in their trauma and, feeling really activated, that, maybe you aren't going to get the kind of support that you're needing or desiring in that moment from that person, and that's okay. So, we can do a little bit of, assessing about, about whether or not it's going to be a good fit, or if we're just going to, trigger one another, or, whatever. I think that we can, do some room reading around that. But that's why knowing the type of support that you're desiring, and then having a full community and network of folks who provide different types of support is really essential. Because then if our go-to person is unable to provide that support, then we can take that somewhere else. So, right, and those things feel like we could do full episodes on those topics as well. So, and I also just really want to encourage that if, you're really resonating with the feeling you don't deserve the type of support that you desire, or when I said that out loud, or we did that reflective exercise earlier in this episode, you felt something in your body respond to that, reach out to me and let's connect about that. That's just a thing to be worked with around this, because overcoming that or healing around that, or whatever needs to happen with that, it can just really get in the way of doing that, reaching out and asking if we believe that we don't deserve that type of support. Yeah, and additionally, if any other questions, either today or anytime, come up while watching one of these episodes, please let me know, send them to me. I'm always taking questions to answer on these live series. Again, the series is for you all. This is for you. I want to be answering the questions that you have and are relevant to you. So please send them along. My special announcement is that for the 8th episode of Dearest Queers, which is in 2 weeks, I am looking for someone who would like some live mentoring around relationships or loneliness, disconnection, all of the topics that we talk about here. So if you have a question about something that's happening currently in your life and you would feel open and really feel up for being on a recorded Zoom call with me that then I will post as the episode, I want to do some live mentoring and talking with folks. That's so in 2 weeks. If me saying that gets you really excited or lit up or even anxious, that might be a good sign that I'm talking to you, please reach out to me. So I'm taking calls for that, or so reach out, so send me a DM with a question and say that you're interested. And so the deadline for that is this Friday, July 31st. So if you'd like some in real time live mentoring around relational things, please reach out to me. I would love to have you on the episode. I'm very excited to do a sort of in real time thing with folks instead of just live talking at a screen. So yeah, if you're interested, reach out. That is it for this week. I hope that you get all of the support that you desire, because you deserve it. And yeah, if you feel called to share this video with someone who needs to hear it, I would love that. You can follow me on Instagram @GrayDoolin. I also post these videos onto YouTube, so you can subscribe to my channel and follow them there. Just Gray Doolin on YouTube. And yeah, those are the things for today. So I love you all so much. You're doing a great job. Yeah, yeah, we're like in a time in a moment, and I'm like just feeling you all in that and sending you an unbelievable amount of love. So I will see you all next week.